It's time for RiffTrax.
Coronet, that mysterious fire at Encyclopedia Britannica, that was us.
Oh, Coronet.
Yep.
Play hardball.
One morning, as Steve was dressing himself, he thought about something that you have probably thought about too. He thought about how easy it was to tie his shoelaces.
Then he panicked, lost his confidence, and tied his own wiener into a knot.
Ooh, Steve?
Once his mother had to do this for him, but now he could do it by himself.
Kind of.
Steve liked to do things by himself.
Well, I mean, he's forced to do things by himself. Steve is deeply unpopular.
He liked getting out the food in the morning for Chipper, his dog.
That's right, boy. Don't skimp. Got a big day ahead of me at the fire station.
Taking care of Chipper was Steve's job
I'm
every
Chipper.
day. Later, Steve had on his coat and was ready to go to school, but his mother hadn't packed his lunch. Instead, she gave him money to buy his lunch at the school cafeteria. Steve liked to pay for things himself.
And his biggest expense, paying not to get his ass kicked by the school bully.
On the way to school, Steve had to cross several streets. He had been taught how to cross safely.
Watch out for
He looked
bears.
carefully
They could
both
be
ways.
anywhere.
And when he was sure no cars were coming, he crossed.
Bears. Bears!
At the busy corner on Main Street, closer to school, he waited again, until the policeman signaled that it was all right.
The policeman had been busted down to crossing guard after his mouth had been writing checks that his ass couldn't cash.
Often we need help from others to get things done. Steve saw that his teacher, Miss Wilson, was helping Peggy.
What? I'm
I
fine.
need this. If I can't help you, what am I?
Leave me
But
alone.
Steve liked to do things himself whenever he could. Sometimes it wasn't easy.
Especially since he'd glued his own boot on by accident.
Steve.
And he thought of asking for help. But when he really tried, Steve found that he could do it.
Years later, as he shoveled the donkey stables in a Mexican circus, he would cite this as his first great success.
All of us know what a good feeling we get when we do something by ourselves. All of us can do more things for ourselves than we may think.
Though none of us can
Like
eat 6
Steve,
saltines in a
We
minute.
put our boots away as soon as they're off. And we hang up our clothes so we can...
So we
when
can
we
what?
get done,
I must
instead
know
of
why
waiting
we
for the
hang up our
teacher to tell
clothes!
us, we can go to our seats by ourselves. Keeping a neat desk so we can find our things easily is something else that we can do.
The complete guide to boot removal. Okay, Steve, let's go over this again.
Sometimes we can help ourselves when we have trouble with our work, as Steve did when he came across a word that he didn't know.
Steve is possessed by a minor demon, too.
At first, he was going to ask Miss Wilson. But she was busy with some of the other children.
Damn it, Peggy!
So Steve tried to figure out the word himself. He looked at the word and then at the picture for hints. He tried
Hats,
to think of a
people,
word that would make
shirts,
sense with
grass.
the other
Hell, I
words.
don't know.
And then he knew. The word was plant.
A big building where you manufacture
He had
things.
figured
Yes.
it out by himself. Of course, we can't do everything by ourselves. Sometimes we learn to do them by watching others.
And speaking of
When
others,
Steve found
if
a
we
torn
learn to
page
care
in his
for
book,
others, to
he didn't
respect
try to
others,
fix
we'll
it.
learn how to care for,
He didn't
to
know
respect
how.
our country.
So he took the book to his teacher.
That is, if she's not having a margarita party with Peggy.
Miss Wilson enjoyed helping her pupils take care of things.
Steve, I have a gun.
She had some tape that she used to fix the page. Steve watched carefully. So he'd himself someday.
Now that's a boot, right?
Not everything's a boot, Steve.
By watching others, we can learn to do many new things for ourselves.
Ugh, Steve.
What?
You can do anything,
Later,
Steve.
when Steve was working a problem in his arithmetic book, the point of his pencil broke.
And with it, his heart.
He went to sharpen it. But the sharpener was hard to turn.
Steve's day is an intense roller
It was
coaster
full of
ride.
pencil
Boy,
shavings
howdy.
and needed to be emptied. Could he do it by himself? Miss Wilson nodded.
I am busy with Peggy.
Steve had watched once before when Miss Wilson had emptied the sharpener. So this time he thought he could do it himself. Uh-oh, some of the shavings spilled on the floor.
Steve was expelled immediately.
Well, we can't always do things perfectly the first time. Sometimes mistakes help us to learn. Steve went on to finish the job.
And found half a Twinkie in the trash. Score.
After dumping all the shavings, he put the case back on the sharpener.
Cost him a finger, but, you know.
Then he cleaned up the floor. Cleaning up is another thing we can all learn to do by ourselves.
My God, what a lonely existence.
Some jobs may seem difficult at first, yet they become easy after we do them a few times.
And Steve's obsessive pencil sharpening disorder began in earnest that day.
Sharper, 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 pointier, pointier.
Later, at lunchtime, Steve had no trouble getting his food. It was easy to find the different foods and to choose certain ones.
This is going to end with Steve
Not too
milking a
long
cow
ago,
and grinding his own
teacher
wheat,
or
isn't it?
parents had to do this for him. Steve felt proud because he could count the money to pay for his own lunch.
Yeah, here's an extra dime for you, Toots. There you go.
And he knew how to take care of the rest of the money his mother had given him. After lunch, Miss Wilson had put out some things on a table.
Steve wasn't ready to put out some things on a table by himself.
Poster paints and brushes. They were going to paint. The children had learned to arrange their papers on the tables, so each of them would have a place to work.
I'm going to beat you guys at painting.
And they had learned to put on their smocks so they wouldn't get paint on their clothes. Of course, there were a few who were not quite able to do some things for themselves, but they were trying, with a little help from their friends.
Gonna put on a smock with a little help from my
Of
friends.
course, no one can do everything well. So we help others with the things we can do best. When Steve had trouble opening one of the paint jars, Ken offered to help.
Ken is Lenny to Steve's George.
Ken would grow up to be the lead singer of the Pixies.
But he couldn't open it either. Joan thought that she could open it. The boys needed the paint, so they let her try.
And planned to mock her failure on Reddit.
Running warm water over the top was something Joan had learned from her mother.
Her mother was clearly a witch.
Now they could get the top off, and they could use the paint. So Joan had shown them something they could do next time for themselves.
Your taste in smocks, Steve? Not great.
Of course, we don't always have to watch others to learn to do things.
Sorry, did you have more, narrator? Or
Hello?
kind of done? Or
I guess.
When Steve
right.
and the other boys and girls were ready to paint, each one started by himself, without looking to see what his friends were doing.
Friends, sure, thinks Steve bitterly.
It's usually more fun if you paint things that you think of yourself.
Like a dinosaur or another dinosaur.
Later, when the pictures had been laid out to dry, Steve and the other children cleaned up. They washed off their brushes, put the paint and other supplies away, and washed off the tables, so that everything was left just as they had found it.
oh God, so much blood.
Taking care of things we know
so
helps keep
much
them
blood.
in good condition for when we wish to use them again. Remember how carefully Steve hung up his wraps in the morning? Now they were easy to find. Steve was able to dress himself quickly.
Too quickly, accidentally put on the teacher's bra.
The children hurried to get home with their paintings.
It's a good thing Steve is wearing those snow boots again. There's a cool breeze out there.
Steve was proud of his. He had enjoyed painting it, and he'd enjoyed the many other things he had learned to do. Like Steve, all of us can have more fun as we learn to do new things for ourselves.
We can clean up pencil shavings. Hooray!
Coronet, we'll still be making films when your great-grandchild is long dead.
It's time for RiffTrax.
Copyright by RiffTrax, all rights reserved.